This is Governor Larry Hogan, and I don't always have time to listen to podcasts, but I do enjoy listening to the Maryland Crabs podcast.
Live from a grungy kitchen table located in Annapolis, Maryland's scenic and historic capital, it's the Maryland Crabs podcast. With each episode, your hosts, Tim Hamilton, John Frenay, and the occasional guest will dive in and pick apart the stuff that really matters most to you. We're too lazy to actually solve any of these problems, but we can definitely stir the pot. From schools, politics, parking in the fire lane, to those horrible people who drive BMWs. And here with this week's episode, live from the kitchen table, Tim Hamilton and John Frenay.
Welcome to the Maryland Crabs Eclipse Edition.
What edition?
Eclipse.
Okay.
That big thing that everyone's outside right now as we speak.
I can't see anything.
John looked right into the sun and started screaming. And I said, dude, be professional. We got to record this now. So he's here with bandages over his eyes like it's Armageddon.
We are here again at the Commons, which has actually very good view of the eclipse.
And the building is seriously empty. As a matter of fact, I think about everyone's out front literally right now, and I'm thinking about going from office to office now, seeing if anyone left anything to eat.
Three new MacBooks.
Just kidding. You're gonna finish that Snickers. So I thought it was gonna be darker out.
Yeah, I did too. But it's sort of like when in the 70s, when I remember the last one, it was sort of weak and unassuming and underwhelming.
Yeah, but you were in your 40s at that point.
It's Y2K all over again. Everybody hyped up about it.
We actually went out because Ben, who has the Commons here, he gave us the glasses. And we went out, and it was really cool. Mm-hmm. And then people randomly were asking to use our glasses. And then after 5 minutes, I'm like, hey, you want to go back in? Because this is going a lot more slowly than I thought it was going to go.
Interrupted slightly by a surfboard falling from the sky.
This car hits a stoplight and hits the brakes, not even hard, and the surfboard goes flying off onto the middle of West Street. It just slides into the intersection.
Surprised he didn't do any damage to his Range Rover. And
everyone glanced at him briefly and then started staring at the sun again. It's like we're in New York City and no one cares.
Just bizarre things in Annapolis.
A lot of feedback from our restaurant podcast last week.
I know. I went to some places and they said, "Yo, get out! No soup for you."
I'm not eating for a while because I don't want any spit in my food. But actually, we weren't hard on anyone, really.
You know, that was one of my funnest episodes that we've done.
That was a good time. I'm not going to lie. And of course, anything that involves alcohol, I'm into.
Right.
And we didn't even, actually, you would think that we were hammered from the way we started, but actually we only had a couple drinks. But that was one of the most fun I had. Not to take away from anyone else, but that was a blast.
It really was. I mean, I thought the concept was good. A lot of people love that. I mean, we're getting a lot of emails saying, hey, why didn't you review this or why didn't you review that?
Because we were very democratic away. John, he was very prepared and he wrote the names of all the restaurants on the backs of each card. And so we only had a limited amount of time. We could have done that for another couple of hours, to be honest with you.
Yeah, we had a bunch of them there. So, but in order to be fair to people that are listening to this, if you've got a review of a restaurant and you want to be on the podcast, grab your iPhone, grab your Android, whatever it is, while you're there or whatever, record a quick review.
Yeah.
Tell us what you like about it, what you don't like about it.
Yeah, keep it short, Hemingway. You don't have to go on and on.
Send us an email to info@themarylandcrabs.com. You can email it to us, and we'll stitch them all together, and we'll do another podcast at some point when we get a bunch.
Right, and we also had a great email from someone who said, I love the show, I listen all the time, and you're always waiting for the but. And her thing was, but you guys are kind of concentrating a lot on Annapolis right now. And I said, yeah, we are actually. And for those people who are outside of Annapolis, we're just all excited about the election, which is an off-year election, as it always is in small towns like this. So we're going to be concentrating on the election for the next few weeks. So we apologize to those who live outside the city. But we're going to try and ramp up some of the crab cakes to make it fair for people who aren't interested in our aldermanic or mayoral election.
Yeah, on the technical end, I mean, there were a lot of things that we've learned over the past year. One of the big things that we've just recently done is how to master this telephone.
Yeah, it's harder than you think.
Calls, which is a lot more difficult without an echo and a delay and all that. And we finally figured out how to handle that. So look to have more coming from a statewide in 2017.
And we need your suggestions too, because we are kind of Annapolis centric because we're here, even though we're part of the greater community. But if you have anyone who's interesting, any elected officials or any business owners, anyone who has a great story, like when we had Mr. Keys, who's the 95-year-old African-American World War II veteran, anyone that you have, if we can't come and see them, we'll have them phone in, but we need your suggestions. So if you have any suggestions and say, hey, you ought to check out this guy, we've had a few of those actually.
Just what's got different parts of the state excited.
Yeah, if you're in Cumberland, if you're in Salisbury, if you're in Baltimore, if you're in Waldorf, Bethesda, Rockville, any of those places, send us a suggestion. We're at info@themarylandcrabs.com, or you can hit us on our Facebook. We have a page and we have a group. Hit us there or send us a message. But we honestly want to hear from you. We've heard from a lot of people, and we've got a lot of great suggestions. And
we'll get back to you.
Some of them are on tap.
Well, definitely. And I mean, if there's a crazy cool festival or just anything, really anything that's important to people in the state of Maryland, we want to get in on it.
Plus, I travel and I can deduct it from my taxes, and that's what I was thinking about.
We talked about the pizza cast.
That would be kind of awesome because I am a pizza. I want to say aficionado, but that's not true. I'm a pizza snob, and I am firmly, as I said in the podcast, I don't believe there's much decent pizza here in Maryland. And I'm from Maryland, too. So it's not like I'm a New Yorker who's just shitting on the pizza in other states. I'm from Maryland. I'm frustrated by the pizza. And there was that list, I guess we talked about that last week, that was the top 10 best pizza places in Maryland. And everyone always, I was looking at the comments after that because they're always so predictable. Well, what about this? What about that? And I was like, what about Rusticanas? And what about La Piazza?
I like that new one. Papa John's. Papa Domino. Let me give another shout out real quick to Kara McHenrick from Annapolis Fork. At the end of the podcast last week, she recommended a restaurant in town that I had not been to.
I passed it a billion times.
And so we went and had lunch before this podcast at Reuben's, which is on the corner of West and Southgate, maybe?
Reuben. No. It's not even Reuben's, it's Reuben.
I think there's a parenthesis.
There's not. Because I thought
I've got a picture.
You got a picture of the two of us.
We'll double check it. But outstanding sandwich. I had a roast beef sandwich. It was outstanding. It was much better than that other place.
And I had
really
the Reuben. It's a greasy spoon. It's a dive, and it was awesome. It was white people, black people, business people, construction guys. It was sort of like El Corrido, my go-to place. They have the same sort of thing. But it was awesome. I loved it. And my meal was like $6.
Yeah, it was $7 for a drink, bag of chips, and a very hearty sandwich.
Yeah, go in there. So check them out. So, Kara, thanks for the suggestion. It was awesome.
And I'm interested to try their breakfast.
Yeah, it looked good. I'm not an early riser, though.
Now, well, what we're doing now is we're going to be starting a series. It'll be a 4-week series because we're leading into the elections of Annapolis and Annapolis City Mayor. We've got a primary on September 19th. And we are going to be talking with Gavin Buckley first, then with Nevin Young, then with current Mayor Mike Pantelides, followed up finally with Senator John Astle, who are all running for mayor. And unlike the aldermanic candidates that we spoke with on the crab cakes, which if you're a voter in Annapolis, go back and listen to them. I think there was some good insight. We're not necessarily giving all of these people the same questions. We're going to dig into what makes them run, really where they see the future of Annapolis on an individual basis.
We're getting a little more specific than we did in the Annapolis Forum because we had a limited amount of time. So when you can sit down and talk to the candidates individually, you can ask them more specific questions. We're not playing gotcha. We're not trying to. We're just trying to get to know the candidates a little better. We're trying to get more specific rather than the broad terms that really are thrown out there in the beginning of an election. I want to make the city more business friendly. I want to make, we want to say, well, how do you do that exactly?
Right. And if you have any suggestions, definitely send them in to us too as well. Well thought out, reasoned questions or whatnot. You can email them to us at info@themarylandcrabs.com. We'll take a look at that and see if we can work them in to the episodes. But this is a very interesting election just because we've got so many different candidates. We've got Gavin, who is this idea guy.
And businessman, well-known, well-beloved businessman.
You've got Mayor Mike Pantelides, who came from virtually no experience, and he's a very fiscally conservative, and he's really become a very shrewd politician over his last 4 years. You've got Senator John Astle, who is in government and politics for 30 plus years. And then you've got Nevin Young, who has never been in politics again. He tends to be a little bit more aligned with, I would say, the liberal side than the conservative side. And this is just things that we want to get down to the bottom with in this whole series of things to find out what makes them tick, what makes them run, and help you decide what's the best choice for you to select for mayor for the next 4 years in the city of Annapolis.
And I think what makes this election so interesting is we have so many different candidates that are running right now in the aldermanic race as well as the mayoral race. And you don't see that a lot in Annapolis. Usually we've had a few uncontested elections in some of the wards, and we don't have that right now. And, some of them have multiple candidates running. And I think that's awesome because, we will pick on Annapolis from time to time because it's like picking on your family. We both love living here. And you think that the problems that we have in Annapolis are unique to Annapolis when in fact they're not. Some of the problems that we face here, you're going to find it with any city of this size. When you talk about bureaucracy and red tape, and then you have to ask, well, is our bureaucracy and red tape any different, any better, any worse than another city like Frederick or Salisbury? And that's something that we're kind of exploring. So I don't think the fact that we have so many candidates is a reflection on the city's in dire straits. I mean, we have our issues, and we have some problems to face, but I think it's really encouraging that you have so many people who want to participate in the process. I really do. Because
it's phenomenal.
All the people, because I listened to, and if you haven't yet, again, go back and listen to at least your ward if you live in the city, and listen to your aldermanic candidates to find out where they stand on it. There are some fascinating candidates there. A matter of fact, there's very few, if any, that like I would listen and kind of roll my eyes and go, what the hell are they doing running? Well, there's actually some really fascinating
I came out of that series of interviews, and for those that haven't listened, I did all 17 of them, but with a really newfound appreciation, insight to every single person that I spoke with. And it was very valuable to me as a voter. Obviously, I'm limited as who I can vote for because I only live in one ward. But it was very fascinating. Definitely go check them out. It was good. I got a huge hats off, kudos, whatever you want, to you for the moral support. As you mentioned in the last podcast, how critical that was to the success of that crab cake series.
Well, hero is a strong word, but it probably, even though you did all the interviews and all the editing,
I didn't say hero.
Well, I know, but I heard it in your voice, and I think that, I think I was probably the hero in that whole process. I mean, you did some great interviews and some great editing and uploading and all the work per se, but I'm glad you recognized my part.
There's a lot more that goes into it than just going out, recording, talking to these people and editing it. Absolutely.
There's just sending you the text every once in a while going, are you almost done?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, let's pay some bills first, and then we'll throw a shrimp on the Barbie, and we'll have Gavin Buckley coming back for mayor.
That was a horrible Australian accent.
What?
Nothing. Hey folks, this is Tim Hamilton, your favorite co-host of the Maryland Crabs podcast. Besides being hilarious and charming on this podcast every week, I'm also a marketing professional with clients all over the region. I buy advertising and media for my clients, including TV, cable, newspaper, magazine, Facebook, blah, blah, blah. And this may surprise you, but I still buy direct mail. I know it sounds very 1978, but to be completely honest, if you have a compelling message to convey, and you do it in a creative way, direct mail is dollar for dollar one of the best advertising channels out there, especially for small businesses who don't have much in the way of a marketing or advertising budget. And if I decide to use direct mail for a project, I call Post Haste Mailing in Annapolis. I've worked with Jack Ellis, the owner of Post Haste, for almost 15 years now on countless projects, and he is, in all honesty, my number one most trusted vendor. In fact, whenever I find myself in a crisis, a sales slump, an event that looked like it was going to fall on its face, a new product launch that was pushed up a few weeks, my very first phone call is always to Jack. He always gives me the answer I need. Maybe not the answer that I want, but one that gets me out of that particular jam. I'm not kidding. He has saved my job on more than one occasion. Seriously. So what does Post Haste Mailing do? Well, they do mailings, duh. That's in the name after all. But it's Jack's decades of experience that gives you the best bang for your marketing buck. Do you want to micro-target certain customers or neighborhoods or businesses? Jack can pull a list for you that makes sure that your mailing gets into the hands of your target demographic without the advertising waste that you get with other media. That means that if you have a small budget, you can still get the results you need. And if you need printing done, Post Haste Mailing can do that too. Postcards of any size, pamphlets, variable data printing, cut sheet laser printing, and a bunch of other printing terms that I don't understand. But Jack understands them, and he knows what's best for my business and how I can get the best bang for my buck. So if you're a business owner and you've never considered direct mail, give Jack at Post Haste Mailing a call to see what he can do for you. I promise you that you will be surprised at the options you didn't know were available to your business. Who knows? Maybe someday Jack can save your job too.
And we are here with mayoral candidate Gavin Buckley. How are you today?
Great, thank you.
Our first victim.
First victim. That's right. We're going to do 4 of these. We've got 3 other candidates already on the books. We are going to be speaking with Nevin Young, Mike Panelides, and John Astle in the coming weeks. You'll see them go succeeding weeks leading up into the primary, so you can get a little bit more information on the mayoral candidates and who you will be supporting come September 19th. I got that date right?
That's right.
19th? Not the 17th, the 19th. So don't screw that up. And we did do the mayoral forum before, which just sort of addressed in general terms. And we wanted to get a little bit specific. We've got some more time to talk about some of your ideas and some of the thoughts on how, as mayor, you see the city going forward, how you feel you can run it, and go from there. You game?
I'm ready.
What kind of tree would you be? Oh, that's funny. Okay, let's say that you're successful. What's your first thing you do, day one? Mike hands you the keys and says, okay, Gavin, good job and good luck.
Well, we're going to strike that peace treaty with Eastport. That's pretty important for me. We can't go on like this anymore. So, no.
Of course.
Not that Eastport would want that peace treaty. I think that, economic vitality is the key for the city. And so I think we have to start to realize that jobs solve lots of problems.
How do you do that on the first day? That's a tough calling for anybody on their first day.
So you walk in, you sit down with HR, you fill out your paperwork, they give you the keys to the office, you learn your extension to your phone, and then what's the first thing you do?
Murals on City Hall?
Yeah. So, this is going to be my first time in this. So, my main thing is to have, experienced people around me, make sure that we get people in positions that know a lot. And I talk about having the ability to try to reach out to, get a second tier or third tier expert out of Charleston or Austin or Boulder or some of these towns, some of these cachet towns around the country that we think are important, that we think are, comparable to Annapolis. So that's not something you can do on your first day, but that's definitely what I'm going to do. I think morale has been a big issue in the city. So we need to get the team together in the city and get some of their ideas on how they think we can move the town forward and whether they're ready to do that.
Well, you talked about, assembling the team and whatnot. As we look at the team that is assembled, some of which has been in City Hall, and primarily, I guess we'll talk like department directors. Some have been there forever and ever and are doing a wonderful job. Some have been there not so long and they're doing a wonderful job, and anywhere in between. Is there any changes that you see now leading into the election as far as changes that you see are needed to be made?
I mean, I don't really have anybody particularly in my sights in terms of that, but I really need, to learn from those guys that are in their positions about what we can do. There's plenty of people that are doing their jobs right now. So, I will take their advice and ask them what their ideas are to move the town forward, and then take it from there.
Somebody has said in past elections that one of the best things somebody coming into office could do was just to ask for everybody's resignation. Whether you accept it or not is a different story, because, everybody obviously works at the pleasure of the mayor.
It doesn't sound like a great business strategy on your first day in office, but I think, I'm pretty on the record saying that we need some new ideas. And some of the people that are, sort of intransigence, or some people that are just that seem to just be waiting out their time. I think we've got to ask those the questions. Are you really here for the city, or are you just here waiting, for your pension?
Do you see the structure of the city, which the biggest complaints that we've heard have been both private citizens and businesses who have to deal with city agencies, and it's the inefficiency. Now, of course, this is probably a complaint that you're going to have in most cities, where things aren't going to move as fast as people want. But do you think that there is something structurally that can be done within city government to make things move faster and more efficiently?
I think that, everybody thinks that the permitting process is broken, right? So I think we have to take a really long, hard look at that. And people have to be accountable. We have to say, you can't, maybe we've not empowered our city officials to make decisions because they're terrified of things being politicized. I think we need to take the politics out of the permitting process, and we need to let people that know what they're doing make decisions, and we should support them in their decisions. So I think everybody seems to be walking on eggshells, and it shouldn't be like that. It should be about what is the best thing for the citizens and what moves the town forward. And I don't see that right now. I see this kind of treading water that we're doing. Nobody wants to make a decision. We're just doing routine maintenance, and plenty of routine maintenance is being done well. I'm not complaining about that, but we should be leaders. We're a state capital. We should be showing the country how things are done. And I don't see a lot of that right now. Transparency
is a big thing. And everyone's talking about the communications and not knowing what one hand is doing, or not telling what the other hand is doing. Yeah. And you've said that we need to be more transparent, more forthcoming with everything that's going on with the city. What steps do you look to do to increase that, to facilitate that?
I think all, meetings should be open to the public all the time. It doesn't hurt you to have people involved in listening to what's going on. It's easier to get things done, I believe, if you're just open about what you're trying to achieve. So I think open meetings. I talk about creating a permit office on Main Street in Annapolis so that people can see. My joke is people can see people with their heads in their hands at the conference table in the window going through the pain. But I think that, it's about service. We're all in the service business. You should be there. This us versus them thing's got to stop. We've got to work together. And the city should be giving you the solutions. The city should be saying, I think you're going to being realistic with residents and developers about what, their expectations are and telling them about the pitfalls of what they might be attempting to do. But everybody seems to run for cover when an application comes in. And instead of trying to fix it together or work as a team, it seems like there's a line gets drawn in the sand.
Well, that sort of ties into the whole reputation that the city has, personally, I feel very deservedly earned as being very unfriendly to business, very unfriendly to development coming in. I'm not saying that you need to open your doors widely to development and say, hey, come on down and do what you want. But you hear time and time again of businesses that get excited and they look at, oh, wow, I want to open up this. Oh, yeah, no. And they leave. I just don't know what the solution. Do you have solutions on economic development, on where, I guess, how it ties in with the downtown Annapolis partnership with the other business entities, the West Street, the Business Association, Eastport Business Association, West Annapolis, and everything else?
I think, there's a segment of people that want to pull up the drawbridge in Annapolis. I joke about...
There are probably some people that want to put in a drawbridge, to be honest. Another one, to be honest with you.
I call it Game of Crones. And it's like all these old cronies that are really, have no motivation to grow the city. But there's still plenty of people in the town that are still trying to make a living, and we have to be mindful of that. So if you pull up the drawbridge, if you disconnect people from their ability to get jobs, from their ability, if we decrease our tax base or we don't increase our tax base, you can't solve problems. You can have all the ideas in the world, but they're just an idea unless you have a way to pay for them. And so the only way to pay for them is we have to think of other sources of revenue in the town. Our property taxes are already so high. Our fee structure is high already. So we have to get more creative on how we raise money in the city. I talk about, I believe property values will increase through my administration because we're going to make the town more desirable. But also we need to look at other avenues like, grants that we're missing out on. I talk about, I'm going to have a whole team of grant writing ninjas on staff who are going to help me source funds.
They speak English besides Japanese. Right?
Do they have a special uniform?
Yeah, of course.
You never tell if they're in the office or not.
But so the money, it's going to be an aggressive approach on grants?
Yeah, I think you need to there's a lot of money that we miss out on. We shouldn't, this town should be, front and center in that sort of stuff because it's obviously because of its history. We will be eligible for a lot of things, obviously because of its, connection to the academy. We've got one of the oldest colleges in the country at St. John's. There's tons of missed opportunity here, that I think that we could find money in those ways. Then we need to find private-public partners to get things done. So you find private-public partners, and some of those private-public partners are obviously developers. But, the right development, thoughtful development can solve problems. It can solve problems like stormwater runoff, different things like that are important that we might not have the funds to achieve, but you could mitigate a percentage of it by putting that on the developer. At that point where the developer is asking the city to do things, we could ask things of the developer.
And that's the hottest point of contention right now is not just right now, but you would arguably say that the last election was decided by Crystal Spring and Compromise Street. That left the election where it was at the end of it because those were two hot button items, and that is development and trying to balance the needs of the city for revenue base and then the desires of the residents to keep it as is. I think what does Eastport said, we like it this way. But is that reasonable to say we have to keep it this way? I'm just using Eastport as an example because Crystal Springs not going away or Providence Point. The development in Eastport is still hotly contested, and these projects are going to keep popping up. How do you balance the needs of the city for revenue, the rights of property owners, the concerns of the citizens, and the concerns of the environmentalists?
So I'm running on it as a quality of life candidate. I mean, we all live here for a certain lifestyle. But I believe you, as a mayor, you can be intimately involved with every development that comes across the table. There are not a million developments happening in this town, right? But what's happening to us is we're getting hammered on our periphery with development, and that's what's causing the problem. I mean, there's been demographic shifts that have happened in this city. People that live on peninsulas, kids are growing up. Their kids are getting cars. So instead of being one car in the driveway, there's 3. Sometimes there's 4. But we're complaining about traffic, but we're not investing in infrastructure. We're not investing in public transport, and we're not reconditioning ourselves to get out of our cars. You know, my thing is making the town more walkable, having bike paths that extend to the whole periphery of the city and that get you to the mall and that get you to the Parole Town Centre. Things that reduce traffic and reduce the need to burn more fossil fuel, all those sorts of things. That has to be. And when you do those things right in your town, people want to come to your town because they think they're doing something good for the environment, you know. So I you know, pushing, you know, this is just general talk, but pushing initiatives like that is going to be pretty important for me, you know.
So if you're looking at the way the wards are spread out, when you talk about Annapolis business or Annapolis residents, automatically everyone's minds goes to downtown. When you're talking about businesses, they're not talking about Forest Drive or Chinkapin or Outer West Street. And the same for residences. If you're talking about the residents of Annapolis, you're talking about Ward 1, even Eastport, and the other outer wards, so to speak. They have needs that maybe have not been addressed as much as they would like. I mean, I've always said that the time and energy that council spends on issues to downtown is astronomical when compared to the needs of other wards. How would you look to balance that of the effort put forth by the city to expand to the needs of the outer wards?
I mean, I've given talks in West Annapolis, on Forest Drive, in Maryland Ave, and the Design District. Those things, those are all very important, and we need to connect to all those, and they're just as important as downtown. I mean, I'm obviously been more focused on downtown because my businesses have been on West Street. But you have to fix the heart of the city first. You have to get that part working properly, and I see a lot of vacancies on Main Street. And I feel like we're not doing enough to make this town relevant to people, and a lot of we need younger businesses. I think we need that to encourage that. I say this: we have a lot of creative kids. You know, I'm getting a bit older, you know, and my kids are growing up, and I watch my friends' kids grow up, but they leave town because there's nothing for them to do in this town. We need them to want to stay here. We need them to want to start businesses. We need them to want to affect the agenda. I think that's important. You need that vitality. And the cities that I always mention, the Austins, the Boulders, the Charlestons, the Burlingtons, the Asheville's, they have that energy in the town, and they have far superior retail than what we have. You know,
thinking back to John Lennon's song "Imagine," it says, "You know, they say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one." I think I got the right song.
That's poetic. You're deep.
You are the anti-candidate. You're the idea guy. You're the guy that comes up with the ideas, the guy that executes them, watch them succeed wildly or fail miserably. And you've not been afraid to do that. You look at I think your first year of the Fringe Festival was kind of a dicey thing.
I love that one. That sword swallow was amazing.
Yeah. You know, and
he's back now, isn't he?
The naked girl in the window with the food. I'm all about it. Actually, there were naked people in the basement of the building where we are right now.
Right.
It was we're at the Commons. It was called the Livery at the time. But do you feel honestly that you're, and I don't mean to sound confrontational, but as the dreamer, as the guy that comes up with hey, let's do something stupid like string lights across West Street and have everybody eat in the street to run a city. I mean, are you aware of what needs to be done to run the city, and do you feel that you're capable to do the execution part of the day to day?
I think because I'm a business owner, because you know I come from that background, because there's a difference between being on a payroll and having to make a payroll. If you've had to make payroll, you understand a lot of different levels of things. So, you know, I'm not saying I'm an expert. I'm not saying that I'm not going to be learning a lot on the job, but I'm a learner and I'm a solutions guy. So I'll find solutions to make things happen. I won't put ideas out there unless I've got a way to get them paid for. They won't just be, you know, pie in the sky ideas. Lots of the things I talk about, you know, I have ideas on how we're going to fund them. Like I said, I'm a guy that can get things done. I see I look around at mayors in the country, like Joe Riley from Charleston, or even closer by Ron Young from Frederick. And those guys were dreamers too. Those guys had ideas, and then, and when I was with Ron Young the other day, he said it is a great thing to be a mayor, because if you have ideas, you can actually watch them happen in front of your eyes, and it's a great sense of fulfillment.
You just name dropped a couple names, with Charleston and Frederick mayors. Where have your travels taken you in this journey to become mayors? And obviously, I'm going to make the assumption that you're doing your homework as you go along. And where all have you looked to for advice leading to us to this point?
I think I read a lot about mayors of other cities. I've spent time in Frederick. I had a meeting set up in Charleston, but that got delayed. But I hope to pull that meeting off between the primary and the general, because he's definitely one of the guys that I look up to in how to get it done. And I think Charleston is a great model. They balance their historic district with their entertainment and arts and access to water and all those sorts of things. And their caliber of food, their caliber of art, all those things that define that town. People say that all the time. Why can't we do things like that in Annapolis? We can't do them unless it comes from the top, unless it's through leadership, through people that care about things like that, through people that have a passion for that. We definitely have a passion for that sort of stuff. We have a passion for cultural growth on our team, and I think that that's important.
Well, every city is different. Charleston is not Annapolis, is not Frederick, is not Austin, is not anything. What city do you see across the country in your background in investigations and everything else that Annapolis should look up to? I want one. Yeah, I don't want bits and pieces of things. Is there one?
Charleston would be the one we have to look up to. Right?
And they had a hurricane that took them out and gave them a clean slate to start with too, which is...
Yep, definitely, yeah. We don't want that though.
There was a consultant that came in here a couple of years ago and said basically the best thing in the world was when the hurricane came up, because it forced the historic commissions. It forced all of these. We need to really push the reset button and see. Can we use plastic mullions on a window? Can we use a fiberglass column in a porch? Do we need to jack up for sea level rise or whatever it is?
So I want to know about we're talking about balancing the needs of the city, balancing the character of the city. I think when you're mayor, there's a balancing act for everything. You're balancing the needs of the ward, you're balancing the needs of the businesses and the residents, et cetera. Another hotly contested concept over the last couple of years has been the power of the Historic Preservation Society, of which you're intimately aware. Putting aside your issues with them right now, there's a lot of residents that do have issues with that, and other issues who say, well, they perform a very important job in preserving the concept of what we want for the city. It's one that I've argued is not as genuine as we would like to think. I think we've created this image of Annapolis that we want, and this is the commission that preserves that. Do you think that they have too much power? Do you think that they go too far? Do you think that it has to be reined back?
I mean, the mural is a case where we decided, we had one disagreement with the city. I'm a preservationist. That's what makes Annapolis special, its scale and its fabric. I believe in that 100%. I would never disband the Historic Preservation Commission. But what we saw happening with the mural, and with the mural, we believed we were fully in our rights to do what we did, because on the code it says that they do not have jurisdiction over paint or paint color. So we followed that literally. We painted the building. Now people will say, oh, you did it to beg forgiveness. No, we didn't. We did it because we thought we had a right to do it, and we saw it as an opportunity to get some public art out there. We're big believers in public art. But I think that, we did not want the Historic Preservation Commission to be in charge of artistic content. So this is what could potentially happen. It means that, an arborist and an architect and a lawyer or whoever's on the commission at the time, they're going to be the ones that choose what's good and what's bad in art. And so we're not saying we wouldn't go before the city if there was an art in public places committee but that committee wasn't even consulted. It was purely the Historic Preservation Commission who felt that we did something against them. It was no conspiracy. It happened in 5 days, and it wasn't hidden. 7,000 people watched that mural get painted.
So it was kind of hard to hide that one. The HPC also has little bit of history of overreach as well with what was tried to be passed last year about being able to gain access to the interiors of buildings and to be able to see whether they're complying with, which was sent back to committee for further review. Personally, I don't think that your position was unwarranted by any means.
So Annapolis is a conservative town, and I don't mean politically. I mean in the literal sense of the word, is that for better or for worse, Annapolitans like to conserve what they have here. The city does not take change well at all. And you represent a lot of change because you have a lot of creative ideas that fall outside of what maybe Ward 1 would want because they're particularly persnickety when it comes to, say, liquor licenses or anything that disrupts their quality of life. How do you sell a lot of your creative ideas to especially neighborhoods that are resistant to any kind of change?
I believe I have a lot of support in Ward 1. Ward 1 is, not just a couple of streets. It's a pretty big area. But I think the people I'm up against think that we can only be singular. We can only be a sailing town, or we can only be a colonial town. And I believe we can be a lot of things at one time. So that can be, the things that we're doing on West Street as well as those things. And so, and those things that make us unique, I will make better. We don't have a trace of an oysterman downtown. Why is that? Why don't we have a trace of a crabber downtown? We're supposed to be famous for that. People don't really go downtowns for crabs or oysters, do they? Generally, maybe McGarvey's. I think they do a good job on that.
Right.
But I don't think it's a thing that we think about enough. So I feel like there's not enough soul down there in terms of that. I say this, New England towns celebrate their lobstermen. You can feel it in the fabric of the town. We have taken that away. We're just kind of a parking lot. I'm not sure what for, but we're not striving to be beautiful. And so people that think they disagree with me, I'm sure if I sit down and have a cup of coffee with them, that we'd find that we have so much more in common than we have that sets us apart.
I remember the last waterman's boat disappeared about 15 years ago. I think it was occupied the spot, the slip where
Stanley Norman is.
Right. Yeah. So, and to your point, I've never seen a work boat in the harbor at all. And I think what you just said about the city lost its soul. What's interesting is how do you balance that tourist town with resident town? It seems to be very difficult. And the Market House is a perfect example of that because does that serve the tourists? Does it serve the residents? Can it serve everybody? Can the city do that? We are unique, and every city thinks they are, but we are unique in a lot of ways. We are a tourist town. We're a government town. We're a historical town. We're more ethnically diverse than probably most cities are along the East Coast with, a third white, third black, third Latino. That's where it gets really interesting. So there are a lot of complex nuances in this town that most other towns don't have to deal with. Certainly you're not going to find that in Newport. You're not going to find that in Frederick. So it's a very difficult and tenuous position to be mayor, and you have to be everything to everyone, and that's almost impossible.
Yeah, we have to create a downtown where everybody feels welcome, and a lot of people in the community will say, I don't feel like it's my downtown. So I think, we're not doing enough to be diverse in the heart of the city. We're not doing enough to get families downtown. We can't just be bars and t-shirt shops. I've got a lot of respect for all the other retail that we have because it's a lot of work. But I think that if you make a downtown that's relevant to locals, and you're local, if you live in Crownsville or Arnold or, wherever, it should still be your downtown. It should be exciting enough for you to want to come downtown. We should also be getting a lot of people we should be the best side trip you can do from Washington, D.C. People should want to come to Annapolis from Washington, D.C. and eat. And like I say, they should want to come and get on a paddle board. They should want to paddle up to Pusses and have a drink. That should be a good thing to do. We should be encouraging activities on Spa Creek because that's our gem. That's this thing we should be fighting for it environmentally.
But again, when you say something like that, then you've got as you mentioned, the game of Crohn's. But you've got that whole contingency of people, as Tim mentioned, that don't want to see any kind of a change. And I remember not too long ago, there was a woman that was complaining about the horrible noise that the paddleboarders made.
And spoiled her view of the creek.
And spoiling the view on Spa Creek, and how it's such a beautiful natural resource that we have, perhaps a little bit more naturally beautiful than before she built the huge house that she has and disrupted all of the shoreline. But that's a real tough nut to crack.
That lady is a friend of mine, so hopefully she's still a friend.
Moving right along.
She just had a big fundraiser for all the environmental candidates, and so you think that there's nothing. It doesn't get any more environmental than paddling, So I'm talking about a downtown, a city where pedestrians are first, cyclists are second, and cars are third. I also think that on the water, swimmers first, paddlers second, sailboats after that, and powerboats after that. So it's a 6 mile an hour zone. We can control it. It's not that crowded, but for some people, some no growth people, it is.
How do you get everyone on board with your vision? And I mean everybody. How do you get all the wards on with your vision, the government employees, the people who live in public housing? How do you get all these people onto Team Gavin?
Well, I think that you have to create a sense of community. So, and the towns that I mention all the time have that. Those towns, people wear T-shirts around that say, "I'm Austin Weird." So you have to create that community. I say this a lot about the town, that we fall in love with it when we stand at the top of Main Street. And then a couple of years later, you fall a little bit out of love because you don't feel any love back from your city. But if you feel like your city listens to you and your city, if your city is doing things for you as a citizen, then you'll do more for your city. You'll volunteer for a board. We've got drastically underserved boards right now. You'll donate money. You won't even mind paying a little bit more tax if you feel like you're getting something back. But I don't think we have created that spirit, that community spirit. And I think that that's because not everybody feels included. So we've been very inclusive on West Street. West Street's success has been its inclusivity. And so, whether it's age inclusive, race inclusive, sexual preference inclusive, we've been that way on West Street. But I think that, we need to build a whole town that feels like that.
Now, speaking of diversity and inclusiveness, so like I mentioned before, we essentially have 3 broad groups. We have, whites, African-American, and Latino. A lot of the African-American are concentrated in the public housing units we have around the city. And HACA has been under fire for various reasons for years and has been embattled, to say the least. Crime rates are not at what the residents would consider to be acceptable levels, and they feel disconnected from the city experience. How would you address the HACA situation to improve it? And follow-up is the Latino community, which I think we do a pretty good job embracing. What would you do to facilitate the growing Latino population?
Just on the African American, we have a great African American middle class as well. So
I don't want to stereotype.
We have to make sure that people realize that people came out of this town that went on and changed the world. That that grew up in circumstances that were less than good, and then went on and did amazing things. And so I think that we need to have people realize there are opportunities out there. And so I think that's what just happened to the Democrat Party in the last election, is that as Democrats, we didn't get the message. People don't want pity. They want hope. They want ideals, and they want jobs, So you've got to actually, the best solution to crime is employment. If people can have work, if you create work in the town, then that gets them out of the cycle. So in public housing, my mum lives in public housing in Australia. You can get it right, And to think that, you're going to get some old age pensioner and you're going to be able to retrain her at 70 and she's going to go on and find a new career. It's not realistic. And what's not realistic is, when we don't invest in the public housing in the city, you see crime happen, and then people scratch their head and say, why is there a problem here? Well, the people that live there think no one cares about them. And so, so
they may not be wrong.
And maybe that's right. But I look at Bloomsbury Square and I look at Annapolis Gardens as good models on how to get things turned around. So finding those right private-public partnerships is essential. It should be our number one priority now. I just did a trip to Baltimore to a place called Uplands, and it was 100 acres of blighted public housing, and they knocked it all down, and then they found a private-public partner to rebuild it. And in that development, there is Section 8 housing, and there is housing for that you can acquire, and there's training for people, mortgage training for people, and they have a 1% dropout rate in this development. And so, 3 levels of acquisition, you can buy houses at reasonable rates. We have great real estate, the public houses in, but we have to win the trust of the people that live there. And what's great about the Uplands development is, people have a path to home ownership, and after 10 years, they can buy these units at a reduced rate, but after 10 years, they can put them back on the market at a market rate. And so what happens with that development is everybody that lives there makes sure that everybody else takes care of it, because their asset is one of the things that's being devalued. And so it's a sense of community through that sort of thing. We have great opportunities on that front. I think, Eastport, other communities, Robinwood, areas like that, they're in good locations to the city, and we can make them better.
One of the things that I keep hearing, and we've talked to some members that live in Hacka and the community that are living in public housing or assisted housing, is that they're absolutely terrified of these public-private partnerships because of the way, and I don't want to say the city, but the way that it's been screwed up in the past. There's a huge fear on Eastport Terrace and Harbor House that if you get a private developer in there to own the buildings while Hacka retains ownership of the land, that at some point they're going to turn around and say, this would probably be a little bit better because it's got a nice view of Spa Creek if we knock down this and this and that. How do you assure these people that that's not going to happen? Because, there's a real strong resistance on that.
You have to prove it to them. You have to prove it to people that this is what we're going to do. These are the terms of the lease. This is the way it will end up in 10 years and 20 years and 30 years. I know people, a lot of people would like all the public housing to go away in Annapolis. I don't think that's right. I think that we need moderately priced housing in the city. We need, people that work in those places. If you go into Bywater, 75% of the people there have been working their jobs, for a long, long time. It's not like everybody that lives in public housing is a welfare mum or the other stereotypes. Sure. It's like there's a lot of people, but when you work an average job, a $30,000 or $40,000 a year job, most of the mortgages are unaffordable in this town. So I think that we can also put pressure on developers to bring in mixed income housing to the town, because I don't want a town that's full of $1 million houses. I want a town where a doctor, or a nurse or a fireman or a policeman can actually afford to live in the community that they serve. And so we should be making sure that we regulate that in ways. And I think you can. You can incentivize development that way.
You talk about jobs and how important they are, and you mentioned that the greatest deterrent to crime is full employment. Looking at some of these kids that are in public housing, that are in challenged situations, what do you see the city's role, and how do you look to help these kids realize that we don't need to go into heroin? And as an aside, I had a conversation with an existing alderman about the whole drug trade and how drug dealers are now assuming the roles of mentors and, if you will, parents in some communities to young kids who then, they'll buy them candy and they'll buy them movies and whatnot. And then the kids will feel obligated to, run a drug deal for them. And then they look up to these guys with all the money, and that's how it perpetuates. But how do you get to the children of Annapolis to let them know, the ones that are in disadvantaged situations, there's something more than living here? Robert Eads talks a lot about lack of recreation for some kids.
Yeah, you look at guys like Robert Eads and Curtis Spencer and that. Back in the day, they were the dealers, and now they're community activists, and now they're helping.
Yeah, they
kids.
were badasses.
So they've moved on. But the problem is, how many people survive the game? So so many people are, don't survive. So my kids go to public school, right? So I can see, as my kids get older, you can see kids that they hang out with can go different directions. And so I think that what we have to do is we have to keep our kids occupied. We have to not defund the community centers that are in the thing, but we should redesign the community centers. Those community centers should have things that are relevant to kids. They should have sound studios, or they should have apprenticeship programs or job training things. So that, I'm a big believer in that sort of stuff, because we don't have, not everyone's going to go to college. So putting that pressure on people is setting yourself up for failure. But teach people skills, because we're all hurting for employees. In the trades that I use in business, in restaurant businesses, we need people. And so, but they don't have to come to you with a college degree, but come to you with training is important.
We touched a little bit before on the Latino population, which is booming in Annapolis. I think by some estimates we're between 19 and probably 24%, depending on how many are legal and how many are not. But that number still exists. They're in the schools, and they're now buying businesses. and homes. So you're seeing, especially on Forest Drive, an explosion of Hispanic-owned businesses. And for a while there, we had a Hispanic liaison. I think we're looking for another one right now for the city. But do you think the city's doing enough for the burgeoning Latino community that just sprang up over the last 10 years?
Yeah, we better get ready for that. So I'm an immigrant with an Australian accent. So, and I got my amnesty under Reagan.
Can I see your green card?
It's just one of those birther things. Yeah. So but that was the last president that tackled immigration reform, And so, lots of the kids of people that have come here, illegally, are coming of age now, are coming of voting age. And I'm sure that for those parents, that must be the proudest moment in their life when their kid can vote or when their kid can go to college, all those sorts of things. So that demographic shift is happening. We better be prepared for that demographic shift. But I do wish that we, on a bigger picture, would consider some immigration reform, because if people could come out of the shadows, they would buy houses. They would not send their money to another country. They would keep their money in the economy. And I think the demographic is, good, well-behaved citizens. But we need to make sure that we're looking out for their kids, because the parents are working so hard that they're not around for the kids as much as they should be. So I'm all about how we take care of young people, because that is the future. That's the future, that's what could cause us problems, or that's what could assure us success.
Last question. I want to take this one. There's several capital projects that have been identified. There's probably several capital projects that you have in mind. I know you mentioned that big Ferris wheel with the at&nbsp brand down the city. But looking at the capital projects, and the ones that we know about and the ones that you perhaps have in your mind, what are they, and how would you rank them as far as how we need to tackle them? What do we need to hit first?
I mean, the biggest one obviously is tidal rise, and how we're going to deal with that. So I believe that we should initiate a worldwide contest on how to solve our problem in Annapolis. I don't think, I think that some of the measures that we're talking about now, and I'm not an expert on this, obviously I'm going to learn a lot more about this, but I think that some of those solutions will only last for a short term, and I think that we have such a big area to cover as far as how much sea level kind of property that we have, that I think that this needs some really big thinking. So I think that you could initiate a world-class competition to come up with a solution for how we save one of the most important historic cities in the country. I think so. That's obviously number one. On my little projects there, I believe we can get open space funds to make things like bike paths and running paths happen. I think that we need more public space, good community space. So I have various ideas on that front. But in general, in general, I'll sort of, as they come across the desk, we'll be ready for them,
Why are you running for mayor? Last question.
You lied.
I know.
So I'm not running because I need a job, and I'm not running because I have other political aspirations.
Restaurant's doing okay?
You're in restaurant business. Come on. You need...
I'm running because I believe I can bring some change to the town. So, and that's a dangerous thing to do in this town, where everybody is no change. But I think not everybody is like that. I think that we think that it's no change, but I actually believe if you build it, people will come, that whole Field of Dreams thing. So I think that I don't see things getting done, and that's not Mike's fault, it's just a general lack of excitement. I want the whole council to just be a team and say, come on, let's get some stuff done, So I think it's...
You should get matching sweatsuits from all of them. That'd be awesome for everything.
All right, I keep lying again, but when did you wake up in the morning and say, I think I want to do this?
I think,
How long have you been running for mayor in your head?
I think I never really... I'd say Mike was an inspiration because he hadn't been a councillor before. And
that would be Australian for politician.
No, he upended the election.
No, he had no
really
experience.
Did. Yeah, but he took apart the political machine that existed for a long time. Not to take away from anyone who had it before, but Mike was a disruptor. You got to give credit for that.
Yeah, and so he had not been a counsellor. He hadn't, had a lot of experience in that sort of stuff. So I thought, if he can do it, I could probably give it a go, And he's learned a lot on the job, I believe, and I believe I can learn a lot on the job. But I think that I've probably seen a lot more, a bit more experience than him. So I think that I've been to a lot more places that I can bring things back to this city that we need.
All right. Well, I think that's it. First of all, thank you for being our first mayoral candidate coming in. And also thank you for being our most popular guest, since so much you've been here, 3 times? This is your 3rd appearance. So you...
4th if you want to count the forum.
Yeah. So you've been the most frequent guest on our podcast so far.
Is it like Saturday Night Live? Do I get the 5 times?
No,
shit?
That is 5. You get the 5. When you come on the 5th, we'll give you the jacket.
I'm excited about the 5th one.
Right.
So,
well, that means
that's right. You get a gift certificate.
And you get to come up with a handshake. That's your deal. You're the one who comes up with that. But this has been awesome, and thank you for coming in. We appreciate it.
No, thank you so much for having me. It's always fun. Thank you.
And that was Mr. Gavin Buckley, candidate for mayor.
It was. And we had his little cohort, Brian Callahan, sitting in the back of the room, too.
Yeah. So at one point, Gavin's rocking on his chair a little bit, and it's squeaking. Not his fault. And I could just see...
Yes, it was.
I get to see Brian just finally snap and just reach over and hold him steady.
He was.
I do that with my kids.
He was just preventing you. You looked like you were going to... I was looking around trying to figure out what that little squeak was or the little tap was. It was kind of interesting.
He's always a lot of fun. I will say that about Gavin. And a lot of it's the accent, let's be fair. Everyone's kind of charmed by it. But he's got a lot of great ideas. And I think, like I said before, when we were going into this, you had all these candidates. And remember that the aldermanic candidates make, $12,000 a year before taxes?
13.5 or something ridiculous.
I mean, this is not even worth your time. So the fact that you're doing this, it's a lot.
For an aldermanic. The mayor is at 100,000, a little over 100.
But he's a successful businessman, and I think that's going to go a long way in the fact that he's doing this because he wants to make a difference.
Right.
And not to say that the other candidates don't, of course. But
well, one thing, and I just do want to preface that we didn't mention at the beginning of this episode, is that these were not, I want to say that we prepared the questions, but the candidates didn't know where this was going. It was the invitation we extended to all the candidates was, hey, you want to come in and do a podcast before the election? And they were all like, yeah. When do you want to do it? So it was I'm not saying, okay, well, I'm going to ask you 1, 2, 3, 4. So they didn't have any idea where it is. And the questions will differ a little bit between the candidates.
And again, they're not hard-hitting questions. We don't want to pin anybody down. We're not looking to expose anyone, not yet. But we just want to get a little more specificity into the ideas that they have for the city moving forward.
But if anybody has any naked pictures of any of the remaining
So John
we'll expose it. Go to AnnapolisSecrets.com and we'll find out.
Yeah, so obviously Gavin, being a business owner, is going to put an emphasis on business. And I think that is something that that's pet issue of ours, is that we always go on and on about the business climate in the city. I think we also talked about some of the frustrations some of the residents downtown have with the permitting process and with HPC. I think that, I always have to emphasize, is that our city's probably no better or worse when it comes to regulation and red tape. Maybe we are a little bit worse. But I was in Cape May, New Jersey a few weeks ago, and I was talking to a business owner there, and he rolled his eyes. He's like, oh my God, this is the worst city in the country to do business in. And I'm like, well, I hear this a lot. So I think if I go to any city, you're going to hear that. But as a business owner, I think that Gavin's acutely aware of the challenges that people face trying to open or maintain a business.
Well, he certainly is. And I will say that it appears that he is doing his homework. As we talked, that he's spoken with the different mayors. He's read about a lot of the mayors and a lot of the challenges other cities that he feels are similar to Annapolis have faced. I particularly enjoyed the point where he said that he's got an appointment set up with the mayor of Charleston that got postponed, so they're going to do it between the primary and the general. So that's sort of the assumption that he's going to move into the general. But it's good. I mean, he's got a lot of good ideas. I think he is, I don't know if the word matured is correct, but I think that he has changed as a candidate from when we last spoke to him early.
He's more savvy.
In the fall of last year. And even as he did on again, without any preparation, we didn't feed them anything for the forum. He seemed to be a lot more confident in his messaging and in his, what he wants to do.
Well, if you look at the slate that we have right here, you have Senator Astle is the one who looks as strong. I mean, he's been a professional or I don't want to say professional, but he's been an elected official for 30 years now. So he understands the process. He understands what you have to do to get elected, how to raise money, how to burn shoe leather, how to do all these things. And you look at Mike, who came in and he looked at the textbook on how to do this, and he did those things you have to do. And again, I always have to say, you have to give it to Mike, because there were a lot of things that went wrong in the last election for Josh that were beyond his control, and that was mainly Compromise Street and
sure. And Mike was there to capitalize on it.
Mike did, but he also learned very quickly what you have to do to be elected, and so he had to learn that quickly. Gavin had to learn that, but Gavin's been burning the shoe leather too. I mean, he's been out most weekends. He's been at every one of these events. So I think the advantage when it comes to getting elected kind of goes to John, because he knows how to do this. There's no learning curve. So when you see and talk about Gavin, there was a learning curve, and he seems like he's kind of hit his stride. Yeah,
I think it'll be very interesting in the end to see how this plays out, because both Gavin, or in the Democrat primary anyhow, both Gavin and John Astle are playing two totally different games.
Yeah,
as far as how they're running their campaigns.
That's going to be the more interesting story, really, is his primary. Just because you have the four candidates, and I don't know if we've ever had four candidates. I'm trying to think. I mean, there's always been kind of a scramble a little bit for the Democratic ticket, but not for the Republican that I can recall.
Not that I remember that we have four candidates. We have had four candidates running at the same time when Chris Fox ran as an independent.
That's right.
But he would not have been involved in the primary.
Nope.
He automatically goes right to the general.
Right. Well, you know what's interesting too is, so we had Brian Callahan here. He's the owner of 49 West, and he and Gavin are tight.
We did 49 West. That's a good place too.
Yep. So we've recorded a few podcasts there, in fact. Mm-hmm. But some of the conversations we have off mic are just as interesting, if not more interesting, than the ones we have on mic. And we actually turned off the mic, and we were all talking for probably a good half hour while we were waiting for the eclipse. And it was interesting to me, because I know a lot of people in the business community, how invested they are in the city as a whole, not just from the business side, but they take a lot of pride, stereotypically, in the city. And Brian he was on the parking committee. A lot of the business owners serve on the various mayoral committees in town that they don't get paid for, that they don't get compensated for in any way, that they put a lot of work into the city. But it was just really interesting to see his take on what the city needed, how the city was doing. He's been here since 1991, just the challenges it faces. But it's always interesting to see business communities' take on that, because they're downtown all day, and this is how they make their living, is in this town. So they know the ebb and the flow.
I'm very vested in it.
It's really interesting talking to these guys, but they're coming at it from a very different perspective than I think you would see Senator Astle or Mayor Panelides or Mr. Young. They're coming from a very different direction. Not to say that the other three directions aren't equally as valid. Senator Astle has got deep roots in the city. He's very well liked, mm-hmm. as does Mayor Panelides. He's got deep roots here. His family is one of the premier families that goes back for years and years, and he's been mayor for 4 years. And I think what makes this interesting is you can have four very different strategies to winning this election. They're all very different.
And we'll figure it out on September 19th. I'll tell you, and also if you haven't had the chance, go back and look through past episodes. We were talking again off mic that Gavin gets a jacket or something, because this is his fourth appearance, if you will,
including
on
the mayoral forum,
including the mayoral forum. But I wanted to say, just so you get a full picture of you can of the candidates, because it's so very important that you know who you're voting for. Go back and give a listen to the 2 episodes we did with Gavin. Certainly, we did 2 episodes with Mike Panelides, mm-hmm. the mayoral forum that we had. We've had Senator Astle on once before. We've had Nevin Young on once before as well. So go back and listen to those, as well as the ones that we're doing right now, before you get out to the polls.
Yeah, and again, listen to the aldermanic episodes, because you have to be well informed. I mean, I think we've learned that now. That you have to be well informed as a voter, and we have some very specific issues to Annapolis that generally, we're such a small town, it affects all of us, really. And by all of us, I mean you guys who pay taxes here. I'm just an interloper.
Yep.
The other interviews that we had with the candidates were more broad-based, and these are going to be more specific. And then we're also working on the mayoral debate after the
primary.
We're going to try and get something together the same way that we did for the mayoral forum back on June 28th at Ram's Head. So John is working. He's kind of the details guy, so he's working on the details, and we're going to come up with questions. So it's going to be similar in the format, but the questions are going to be much more specific, because we're going to have more time.
And there's going to be rebuttals. It's going to be more of a typical debate. And we should have a date, hopefully, within the upcoming weeks to be able to tell what it is. And we've got to figure out the ticketing and some other things, but we'll be able to figure it out. We plan to have it also at the Ram's Head on stage, which was a fantastic venue.
That was a lot of fun. They were great to us, too.
Yeah, it was great. So tune in. Thank you for listening, but tune in next week and you will hear, who are we going to hear? Mayoral candidate Nevin Young.
Nevin Young is next week, right?
Right, and then Mayor Mike Panelides the following week, and then Senator John Astle.
Right, and then for everyone else in Maryland, that's when we're going to start spreading out again. So bear with us for our Annapolis-centric views for the last few weeks. We had to do it. All right, so in the meantime, of course, you can find us on Facebook. We have a page and we have a group. You can find us on Twitter, which is my favorite place. It's at MD Krabs Podcast. You can find John at at&nbsp, and I am at Tim Hamilton 47. You can friend both of us on Facebook. I really don't differentiate between who friends me or doesn't. I don't discriminate.
And the reviews over on Apple Podcasts are getting lonely, so leave a review, leave a rating.
Yep, those are important for the metrics. Those are important for the way that they post those episodes to make it easier for people to find them. So if you could rate us in a review, that'd be fantastic. A positive review would be even more fantastic. But be sure to subscribe. Again, so if you're listening to us on YouTube right now, that's great. Or you're listening to us on Facebook by clicking on the icon, that's great. But we really need you to subscribe.
That's right. You finally got off your ass and did Facebook, didn't you?
No, well, YouTube, you mean?
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Right.
That's what I meant. YouTube.
Yep, I think I did it while drinking one night. But you have to subscribe because, again, once you subscribe to the podcast, whenever we have any new content, we have the crab cakes coming out along with our regular episodes. They're delivered automatically to your device wherever you listen to it, and you don't have to worry about it, and you don't have to worry about missing anything. So you can also, if you have any information that you want to share with us as far as people we should talk to, or you have any questions or criticisms, we're at info@themarylandcrabs.com, and of course our website is themarylandcrabs.com. And we're not doing Instagram yet because that's a pain in the ass.
So that's about it for this week.
That's it. So we'll see you next week with Mr. Nevin Young.
This has been the Maryland Crabs Podcast with Tim Hamilton and John Fernay. Sure to follow them in all the regular places, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and online at themarylandcrabs.com. Take a moment to rate us on iTunes. Now, get the hell out of my kitchen. Seriously, go!
You still here? It's over. Go home. Go.